all of them. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Okay, shout out to the person that was waiting, as I was sure about to postpone this live till way later, but I want to try to stay somewhat close to time. We begin with the name of Allah, the All Merciful, the Especially Merciful, and with sending favor on our leader Muhammad and his family and his companions, all of them. And we also begin with the prayer of Moses. And welcome if you're new here. Welcome back if this is a return visit. Please do continue to be a part of the family. We are going on here almost the 50th day, almost halfway through, going for 100 days here, talking about a few things, but number one being levels of unearned advantages. So the whole idea is like, what makes you deserve to be breathing, to be seeing, to be walking, to be able to hear? What makes you able? What makes you deserving of whatever you ate yesterday, whatever you drank yesterday, whatever you may or may not, um, you know, whatever you may or may not have. For instance, certain diseases. Who gave you the right not to have certain diseases? Yes, not having can be an unearned advantage. And so I think often when we talk about these things, and this is not to dismiss the social advantages by any stretch of the imagination, but there can be a pitfall to these things. On a practical level, it can get very, very depressing if you're not the one that is studying, but you're the one that's being studied. If you're the one that's actually experiencing these injustices versus if you're just someone from, and that's, there's levels again, because everybody has some level of earned and unearned advantage, even socially. But I just think that typically we tend to certain types that can be quite disempowering for people who look like me, speak like me, all of the things. And so we did discuss that a little more yesterday, specifically talking about white, more obvious white privilege. And there were 30 points that Peggy McIntosh shares in her very famous article, at least in the academic sphere, which is white privilege. But today we're going to focus more on unearned advantages. And something that really stood out to me in just a sample reading of Liberation Therapy, and that is by Sheikh Ali Ndao. I don't know why, guys, his whole book is not available. And it's just been so hard to get for the past 5 years, actually. It's been on back order. And then now it's like available on Kindle, but it's not. And it's really weird. It's really confusing. But even in the sample, there is such a gem that he ends with talking about how when we reach certain peace or certain levels, we can relate with anyone. And it really coincides nicely with the saying of the Prophet, God bless his soul, and grant him peace, of how we are to free the oppressed and the oppressor. To do that, we must recognize an oppressor in ourselves and how we are oppressed, right? Both literally and figuratively, both outwardly and inwardly. But I do want to talk about something that I can personally speak on as far as being like relating to oppressors, as crazy as that sounds. I specifically experienced that nationality privilege, that unearned advantage, which really is like a mixed bag. I know last time I talked about how all non whites in America are domestic violence thrivers. And I had a very distinct reason for that, being that America has a history of being physically, also emotionally, mentally, financially, um, even sexually harmful to non-whites. When I mentioned that most Black people in America have mixed white, and that was not a humble brag at all. which I get that some, unfortunately, just based on the circumstances of our world today, how that can be perceived, but it is quite the contrary. Those A lot of that is based on a history of sexual harm, sexual violence against Black women and men, but especially women, and as slaves, and later on just as second class citizens. And to this day, I have tasted something of the violence. Like, the only time a white guy has ever, okay, I can't say that. There are Muslim white guys who have been interested in me. But as far as like actually being sexual with a white guy, I will be 100% candid in saying it has only been in a workplace setting that was not welcome. And so I just think that it can be quite easy to dismiss these things as, oh, that was then, this is now. But in reality, we still see the effects of that today. And I do see that there's a reason for that. Like, I know everybody has their own situations and stories, but when we see a pattern and we see a history and we see a system that is constantly doing these oppressions, not just to Black people, right? Like, this is a common thread for a lot of people, but I don't think any other people have really been enslaved America. So I think that definitely most Black people in America are domestic violence thrivers in America. And I say thrivers because we still recreated our own culture after having ours robbed from us. We still have beautiful interracial marriages, even with white people, despite the traumas that they have inflicted on our peoples. Like, we still have so much beauty, we have so much culture and like just so much to offer. We have learned to fine tune our strengths to the point that a lot of the reason that I saw nationality privilege was because of the contributions of Black people. What do I mean by that? So I'm going to actually pull up an article that I wrote sometime back on visiting the UAE, being there for almost 2 months, not quite 2 months, over a month for sure. And if I can find it, it's going to just basically talk about the pros and cons of living abroad, specifically in a country that is known as Muslim. And during a Ramadan, too, even part of Ramadan, being able to taste that in a Muslim country, I think it's there was a question like, would you live in Afghanistan? And I gave a decisive no. And I gave my reason for that. But I very much have considered and contemplated these things, and I think I can embrace now that I do have nationality privilege having grown up in America. There is a certain overall, like, I'm gonna get into the specific points of pros and cons that were noticed in America versus overseas. But I'm sorry to say that there is a level of, I can understand why people would want to be in America, basically. Like, even in the UAE, which is like a copycat America, a lot of what they do and how they move is like, for instance, Circle K. They have a sit down restaurant in Circle K. Like, they really pedestalize things like a gas station, convenience store, something that we would have like drug addicts hanging around and like just like a tacky place for America, has a sit down restaurant area in it for one. So it's kind of commodified. Like, it's so weird. It's so weird. But I think the thing that really stood out to me that I was like, oh, okay, I get it, was how much more sturdy and robust the states felt compared to the UAE as a Black woman. And granted, I wasn't in the most, my partner and my partner and myself both, we weren't like in the most well off financial situation. So I would imagine that it could look different if you're a very successful business owner and so on and so forth. But even then, I think that there's certain safety nets and opportunities that I just didn't feel in the UAE. And perhaps even if I were a UAE citizen or a Middle East citizen and that was my culture, that it would be a different experience. But I'm going to just share some of the things that I noticed compared to the US. So I'm going to start with the positives, okay? The positives. of living in a Muslim country, quote unquote, because I think it's important to have that in the background as we consider this so-called nationality privilege. Okay. So, hi, Dylan, Ayala. Hi, Tony. You asked if I'm lesbian Muslim. That was an earlier episode I did with my ex-husband. I already have been very clear about being on the spectrum. So, as far as that whole thing goes, this is old news. Pick Mari's the goat. What's up? Welcome. So here's the things that I would say as far as the pros, it would be that the experience of being in the UAE as a visitor is cool. I would 100% go back to a Muslim country, to a lot of countries, when and if in a better economic and social situation. And I just sense comforts of growing up in America. So I want to keep that as a home base. And it was never a question of that. Like I never really planned to stay there in the first place um, with my kid's stepdad, whatever you want to call it. So, but that is how I was looking at it, anyways. But even most people, we need a lot of myth busting when it comes um, to looking at these other places. So, oh my gosh, I really can't find this article though about pros and cons. I think what it is I just did the podcast, and that was really the thing that listed out what I found to be, um, the differences between privilege and being an American and like being overseas. So it's something you just experience, and it's a very uncomfortable feeling. I think it could be compared, like it's hard to really compare it, but it's a taste of that guilt that you feel like having grown up with toilet paper, for instance. A lot of people, by choice, but also not by choice, don't use toilet paper. And people don't want to talk about it. But I felt very like spoiled American, really, really needing and loving and not really even knowing that this was a thing. And it was a big thing. The bidet was nice though. There were bidets in a lot of places. So like even with the little unearned advantages that I may have felt or noticed, it wasn't really an advantage. It's more so just how I grew up. And it's how I've been conditioned. Certain things that I've been conditioned to expect, like, oh, ramps, like for people with disabilities or people, there's a new word for it now. I'm sorry if I'm not being politically correct, but the people who are not able-bodied, like there weren't really a lot of ramps all the time for people with wheelchairs. So you look and you see like these high sidewalks, like a sidewalk this high up, and it's like, how does a person in a wheelchair get around if they don't always have a car? And I guess the point is that they do have cars and they have those supports within being a citizen there. But I don't know. I think maybe that privilege was just within the country, people who are citizens of it. And also with the passport, I know this is something that's more common, is like just not having as long a line and things like that. If you have a US passport, and people kind of looking at you with more respect because you have um this citizenship, and because of, I think, again, the opportunities that can be afforded as far as college education, what have you. Maybe I should just play a little bit of the podcast, this old podcast, to give more of an idea of the pros and cons. How a lot of us, are drowning in these Israeli dating apps. Yes, I've actually melatonin sleep gummies. Does it require investment? Of course. Is it a solve all? Absolutely not. It can even have reverse effects, but was it worth trying 100%? So while we say allow one's ease for you, for instance, say you are on these dating apps, you're fed by the so-called experts, and that's no shade to anybody. But for instance, when it comes, and I'm just going to say this, and we'll go into the comparing and contrasting, but he doesn't allow it. And That's one of the downsides of the Muslim countries. One of the many, but basically Allah is as we think of him. If we come to him in arm's length, he comes running. Right? If we come to okay, so they're talking about something they don't allow. I think that there are definitely regulations there that I don't necessarily see it always enforced, but like you would see a sign that says, no food, no drink, this and that, like in an eating area, like right next to a kid's play place. There's an eating area. You can get the food, but you can't eat it there. So I would see little things like that I wouldn't necessarily see um, in the US. So that's kind of what I was talking about there. Law comes running. And so, finger on, but I will start with the positives of the culture shocks. Number one, being the Moonlight hair salon. That is the best salon experience I've ever had at the best rate. I didn't intend pictures there for obvious reasons, right? I'm a hijabi, I don't show my hair to the public, but for $199 AED, which is roughly $70, you could get 5 beauty services served with hot tea. The customer service was actually impeccable there. This when I say customer service. Okay, so customer service. That is something that I think was a positive in the UAE in some ways. So for instance, there was this hair shop called Moonlight, and it was probably the only hair shop that served women with like all types of hair, especially of African descent, Black women, all the things. And they were so great. Like, I think this was the first time that I had 3 people working on my hair at once, like just braiding my hair. That's what I was talking about. Like the tea, they gave you tea. They even offered like really good price, like manicure, pedicure, all that, in one. And I just found like the kindness was cool. And overall, people were very just kind, just very like polite for the most part. Although there could be a situation like at the airport where like a group of women are just chit chatting and then you're waiting for help and you don't necessarily get it for a while. Or it's like, oh, am I interrupting you? Because it's not perfect, there's not always customer service. But that's something that I did notice where I think in the US, you could probably have like a hierarchy, more of a hierarchy where you could call, you could talk to a supervisor, you could get that, again, like that infrastructure that would have more accountability. People have more accountability in terms of businesses. And like there's more, people take that more seriously, like the big businesses. And again, it's just something that I'm used to. It's just like if you weren't used to that growing up, then you might not see that as much of a requirement or a privilege. But even still, I can see why people would want that because it's a certain level of like just cemented power that has come from years and centuries of of domination, right? This domination of the West, not in like a way that was by choice of other countries or peoples, but of force, of violence that has led to this sturdiness that tangibly felt in I tangibly feel here in the US compared to being in the UAE. I visited Costa Rica, I visited Mexico, I visited Saudi Arabia, alhamdulillah. And I think it's a similar vibe. Like obviously there's no place like home. So that's the number one reason why I would say that I would not necessarily want to live anywhere else. Because this is where I was raised, this is what I'm used to. And I just always love to have a home base. Like it's like I've been there, I've done that, I've seen other places. And I think in other circumstances, I can definitely understand and relate to people who would want to be expats or travel abroad, live abroad. But let's just keep looking at the pros and cons. I believe here. It's Ethiopian for sure. She's Ethiopian. You know what? This is kind of nice. And again, I did post a short of that if you want to see the video clip of my child's first day at the beach. Oh my gosh, it's a dream come true. I'm so grateful to have to. So that's just talking about like more things you can find anywhere. It's talking about the beach, that was nice. But I definitely felt it. I felt the transaction.
They're sticky from robbery and major.
Transactional though, like that's the thing. I felt a lot of transactional energy from, just the people. I think that when you have more privilege, when you have more unearned advantage, that you can afford to be more relational. But if people are living off of their business and they don't necessarily have social services to fall back on, or they have a lot more pressure financially or whatever it may be, you might be more tit for tat. Like you have to, I can't really even think of a specific example right now, but I do think that there is definitely not a lot of freebies. I'll say that. Like there's not like promotional things, freebies like you would find in libraries, for instance. Even the libraries were not public, and they were very much like you have to pay for the classes there. Whereas in the U.S., you have free classes left and right, like every a library, everywhere. But granted, they're not as quality as the libraries were in the UAE either. So I definitely, again, like I think for every con there was a pro, but again, I think the con outweigh the pros for me because of my background and the culture shock. I just think that it was not like home. It could not be home because that's not you get the point. Not how I was raised.
Times there, which was probably the biggest draw for me coming from the background that I come from, and just a lot of the trauma, if I do say. Um, it was a really, really nice break to just let my guard down a little bit.
Oh, I see a lot of comments. I will respond, but I just wanted to share that last pro. I think this is the last pro that I hope you can hear. Let me know if you can't hear. Just sharing like the pros of living abroad and how I started to see some unearned advantages of being raised in the West and being a U.S. citizen, and how I can relate to that level of unearned advantage. But again, we're going to go into like hopefully this is going to tie back in to unearned advantages that we all have, because even no matter how oppressed you may feel, how unfair or other people's privileges may seem, we always have some level of privilege. And again, ask that question: who gave, like, what made you deserve to be breathing right now? What made you deserve to have the shoes that you wore, or what made you deserve to be able to move and to be able-bodied if you are, or to be whatever, whatever things that you have. There are, like, anything we have is from Allah ultimately, and it is an advantage. We really can't earn Allah's mercy and favor, but I don't want that to be dismissive of the reality that there are certain there are extra privileges, there are certain injustices, like there is a level that is not directly from Allah, and is actually a secondary result of, just interference. Like it's shaitanic in a sense. It's very unjust. It's very unfair. It's very unharmonious, and a product of violence. So, oh yeah, flushable wipes. Somebody's, yeah, like you have. I'm so grateful to God for toilet paper and flushable wipes. Yes, like that's a big thing. It's not just in the Middle East. It's like a lot of countries. My father was raised Panamanian. They did not have toilet paper. And a lot of people, again, this is 100% choice, even in the US. And I know we can be very judgy about that, but it's nothing to judge. Like it's quite fascinating because the bidet does really get you clean. Like, the little shower thing for your behind, that is awesome. Like I would totally have that. Like I totally plan to get that. So anyways, somebody asked if I have a job, you're really concerned about it. Why? Are you trying to pay my bills? Because we can talk. Like, are you trying to offer me a job? What's going on? I do. I have several jobs. Again, I've said it before. Um, but yeah, if you're really concerned, then feel free to check my description because my PayPal and my Cash App are both there. Um, Aisha, I don't remember mentioning Aisha, but I do remember mentioning Asia, who is my sister in a short. They mention her here. I wish I could travel as much as you have. You've lived a very privileged life. That's another one. I remember talking to this Senegambian who had never been on a plane before. Okay. And I think even just for my son to be as young as he is and to have experienced that, I mean, the circumstances weren't the best, but even that in of itself is such a privilege. Like even but the thing about it is like even people in the US, a lot of people in the US have never been on a plane. I'm going all the way to West Africa. There are people here in the US who have never been on a plane. And that's class privilege. That's unearned advantage of being in a certain class. Which class? I mean, we were raised lower class, to be frank. We're very lower class. But lower class America is like middle class a lot of places, like around the world, I think. And even in like the US, I think lower class is not ghetto. We were not raised in the ghetto. So I think there was a lot of ghetto kids who have never been on a plane, even. A lot of like more country bumpkins. Like we were pretty country, but we weren't like we did live in a trailer, but you know what I'm talking about. Like we weren't those types of people necessarily. Like we got to get on planes. We got to go places. And so I think that that's an unearned advantage as well. It is. And it does make you I think it's one thing if you just meet one person and they say, "Oh, I never did that." But if you're like surrounded by people who are like, "Whoa, you've been on a plane. Oh, you have this passport." Like immediately, like when it becomes a pattern one after the other, it gets very uncomfortable. It gets very like, and even this is one other thing I'll spill, like one other piece of tea before I get back to you guys' comments is like, I now know why, like I had this wife of a professor that I had gotten to know. They're both white and they're both converts. And she was telling me I would never marry somebody that's not American. I was like, huh, that's kind of interesting. But I kind of understand her now because I think the level of just inequality, like, is so, it can be such a gap. It can be such a driving force apart from each other because you just seem spoiled, you know? You just seem like if you're American and the other person is not, you just well, especially if you're a woman. Like, I think if you're a man, it would be different. If you're an American man married to somebody who's not American, I could understand that. But if I am, and my partner is a man and he is looking up to me, like, or he is like maybe even having some covetousness of the way I was raised because of my nationality, that's a problem. So I just think that I can understand her now. Do I agree? Somewhat, yeah. Like I really am not looking for a foreigner at this point, you know, like from the US. I really do accept my privilege in the sense of that citizenship piece, even with the duality of being a second class citizen, like being lower class, being seen as all these stereotypes as a Muslim and a black woman, all of that. Like I just think it's very uh, it's 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 very hard to have that recognized and affirmed and validated in a marriage if there's like basically it's like, well, you were American, you were raised American, like even if they try to empathize with you, they're still going to feel that sense of, but you're American, so you can't really complain. They might try, they might go to an extent and be really like really empathetic on some levels, but they just cannot relate to you. That's the thing I think that she was really getting at. They can't relate to you to your pain, and they also can't relate to your comforts, like things that you're used to, like social services, like of all things going to the Department of Economic Security and things like that. Like that's how I was raised. Like my mother would go there. That's just like our community. This is something that we utilize. Food banks, right? Like I didn't really necessarily see that overseas, both in Costa Rica, both um, in different places. I'm sure they're there, but a lot of it is really just only for the citizens too. Whereas in the U.S., I think you can kind of finesse a little bit, and you can use it. I don't know. You can speak on that more, but I get where that white professor, the wife of the professor was coming from when she said that she would only be with another American when she became Muslim. That's what she said. Do I promote that? No, but I think there's a level of practicality to that. If anything, I do promote interracial marriage, but international marriage, I think it depends on your gender. I think certain genders, you have to be aware of what comes with the territory of that. It can be quite tricky to navigate. I wish that I could. Okay. Can you adopt me? Are you serious? Sevi, what in the EBT is going on here? You're regretting your choice? Which choice? Setting up daycares. What is EBT? Why does a law let children die painfully? Uh, I don't know that a law does. For one, something I've learned is that we're not to really ask questions that could potentially put a dent in our faith. For instance, it's like me trying to explain the bills to my 3-year-old. I'm not saying you're a 3-year-old. I'm not saying I'm paternalizing you, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think it's fair for it's like it's not appropriate. Some things are not appropriate. Like, I think there's a level that comes where he will naturally start to understand and witness and see how the bills work. But until he's older, I would not put that on him. The same way that I don't think Allah would put it on us to understand these kinds of questions about children dying painfully, all of that. And I don't know that that's even the case. What we believe is that children who pass before puberty are automatically sent to paradise. So do what you will with that. But they're martyrs, right? Like you know that they're in heaven. Uh, Hello, sister. I left Islam. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you come back. Yes, tech jacket, Zach, privileged. I don't think it's privilege if you work for it. I mean, it's just the thoughts. I don't know what you're talking about though. Like most of the things we have, we do not work for it. We don't work for our breath. We don't work for our eyesight. We don't work for our hearing. We don't work for our, the ability to blink, to swallow, to run, to walk. We don't work for the ability to speak. We don't work for the ability to think, the ability to feel, the ability to empathize, or the ability to draw a boundary. Most of the most important things we have in life, we don't earn. And it is a very capitalist, a very like post enlightenment era westernized frame to always be thinking of what did you earn and what did you do to deserve, and you know what I mean. Like, I get that there is a level of that, and there is privilege, like socially, if we're just looking socially. Even that perspective, the fact that that perspective has been so raised up, is a result of social privilege. It's a result of pushing down certain other cultures that don't do that. Certain cultures, and I don't think, it may not be a golden, like a perfect culture, but I do see where, you know, we could coexist in certain eras, right? The golden age, and even in certain places, you hear about, I've heard about, I don't live there, but like, um, there are places, even in, for instance, Costa Rica, where you would see different races or different people of different backgrounds united under a certain language, right? Spanish. And I don't do in-depth study of those things. That's beyond the scope of what I know. But I will say that the privilege does exist. There are pretty much majority of things we have and do are unearned, especially and mainly in the US. I think that we have a lot of advantages um, that are just evident in our extreme debt. And it's not just financial debt. We have a debt to the world of of blood, right? Like we have sacrificed so many people to be in this powerful, quote unquote, worldly powerful place that we are. So, and then obviously we talked about white privilege last time where you can look into the visible knapsack, but it's the little things that add up, just being able to open a magazine and see yourself represented, being able to have a white person pop in any race's head when you think about civilization versus a dark skinned person. Even though we have dark skins in America, eh, you know, so it's like either you get it or you don't. Almost, it's like one of those things, you get it or you don't. But I wanted to talk about the levels, just to introduce the levels. We can never cover the levels, but pretty much everybody has some level of unearned advantage. That's the point. Uh, I will go back into talking about or sharing some of the pros and cons of um, of living abroad after being raised in the U.S. and just how that privilege of nationality became apparent after living abroad a little bit. But here I see lower class in the USA is genuinely higher class or like middle class in the third world countries. That part. From what I know, hell, working in McDonald's pays more than a desk job, from what I know. And that's it right there. That's it right there. Like, okay, that's going back to the Circle K thing. Like, seeing this fancy Circle K in the UAE, right? Like it had legit sit down tables in the Circle K. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Whereas in the US, Circle K is like a trashy convenience store. That speaks levels as to how the US is seen. Like our convenience stores in over abroad are kind of like seen as like touristy, like exciting, like sit down restaurant. You know what I mean? Like it's giving major white privilege. It's giving major nationality privilege. When I found that, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like it was a nice Circle K. Like it was made to look very fancy, and there were literally tables in there for people to sit down and chill out in. Nobody's chilling out in Circle K in the U.S. Like I have never seen a Circle K on the many corners that they're on here that has a sit down table. That is alarming. That is like wild. Yeah, awesome point though. Awesome. What's your name? Tech Jacket Zach. Oh my gosh. Um, so I'm seeing a lot of wild talk here. Be careful because I will be swift with timing out some people if you get crazy with the talk. Um, are you a streamer? Can you do a Trump impression for us? No, I can't. I am so glad I can't. No, I wouldn't want to. I'm free falling. Okay. No, that's cut it out. Okay. Yeah. And the only things that come to my mind are very vulgar to impersonate him, so I would not know. But let's finish with our comparison. I'm just gonna do a little more comparison of the UAE and um and the US. Oh, the only other thing is you're fired. That's all I can say. You're fired. You're fired. That was the one time that I'm not even gonna lie. My sister and I, we used to jump to watch The Apprentice growing up, which Trump owned. I'm very embarrassed to say Trump started The Apprentice show, and we love that theme song, money, 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 money. And we would crack up laughing at the end when they say, money will drive some people out of their mind. Oh, and the people look and they turn their face to look at the screen, and the angle that they shot it at was just like pure gold. But I can't do Trump impression. I can't do it my life. That's the closest I
Respect out in public to be able to have my child wonder a little further.
Oh, this is the pro. I'm still talking about pros here. So another pro of being in a quote unquote Muslim country that I saw as a Muslim, especially, I think anyone though, you felt like in the UAE you could be more safe. I felt safe to cover. I felt safe to like fully cover. Like I could totally go out in a abaya, like the full dress, and I wouldn't get stares, nothing. If I try to go pick up my kid in an abaya, oh, I'm asking for some microaggressions. I'm asking for some sort of like pettiness or some sort of like confrontation, even like some extra layer of drama that I don't need. Versus in the UAE, I'm actually given more ease when I cover. But even if I didn't, like I saw plenty of people who weren't covering, they were fine too. They were walking around in their shorts and their whatever, the bikini at the beach, no problem. It was all everybody was together. I saw people with like Buddhist tote bags, and I thought that was really cool. Um, and then also, I think with my kid, especially, I think there was more safety feeling because you don't have major crimes there in those countries. So I could even I don't know, I could just do a lot of things where like the women's park was like really secluded and I could just like sit back and I didn't have to constantly be on my guard like somebody gonna take my purse. Like I could totally leave my purse. Now, is that a good idea? No, but I could leave my purse, go to the public restroom, come back, and then it'll be fine, you know? And it was a very communal feeling. And so I'll get back into that a little later. But I like that about living abroad there.
Fear so much, but I mean, obviously you still have to be safe. You still don't just leave your stuff. You still watch your kids, but it's not like the level you would think of in the U.S. And certainly not if you're coming from a background where you have been dealing with abuse or trauma. So yeah, there's a family culture, and so there were ladies parks that are closed off only for ladies, where there's prayer rooms, which is another plus. But the family culture, I felt it. Like in Ramadan, I got this big old box from a sister I'd barely met, and we were chatting it up. And she basically reached out to me after we first met, and she told me, it's Ramadan, I get this to all my friends and family. And I learned also from my husband that they have like Halloween vibes during Ramadan, where the kids will go door to door and they actually get food. And like ask me sugar for your neighbor for sugar. The kids will ask for candy or ask for food and they get it. Get this big old Ramadan box. Let me know if you want me to talk more about that because I definitely also appreciated the pricing of groceries and how things were in bulk. And you're thinking about moving overseas, especially UAE, and this is of value to you, please let me know. Do not be shy. I promise you, you will not be disappointed because I will give you the tea on that. There is better childcare overseas.
Oh,
Another major plus for me. Okay? That overall, the levels of care and safety are higher in the country, right? So that trickles down to the childcare.
so here's the other thing too. I say that with a caveat because you have to pay out of pocket for most things, whereas in the US, you do have what is called like childcare subsidies, where you can get childcare covered potentially if you are under a certain income or what have you. Where I didn't necessarily see that for non-citizens. Maybe if you're a citizen over there, you can, because I know in the US too, you have to be a citizen for some of those things. But yeah, that's something else that I think was an unearned advantage that you can point out as like certain services, things like that, that you might notice. And the quality of care, though, I think overall they were very clean. They're very big on appearances. So I actually can't objectively say how quality the care is overall there, but I sensed that it is better in general over there compared to the US. So that was another pro. But again, for every pro, there's a con too.
And me being Muslim, I felt that people have something higher than themselves that they are accountable to and for, and a certain code of conduct where they're not just doing anything. And even if they're not Muslim, like a lot of people weren't, a lot of the nannies weren't, they still have a higher standard because they are coming from high stakes situations where they can't afford to leave the country or get in trouble. So yeah, I felt that, and it was really, really nice and affordable. The next thing is that you near all travel destinations on your to the west, you have Africa, different African countries. The north, you have all these different places. East, south, like all around you. You can take a couple hours ride and be in totally different places, like Dubai, for instance.
So perhaps you could look at the pros of being abroad or in the Muslim country, UAE, as unearned advantages of being there, which is basically like having really good location, like being, you can literally you could visit somewhere in Africa, you could visit somewhere in Asia, you could visit somewhere in Europe, all within other places in the Middle East within a reasonable distance. And I think that that is a big perk for people who are more travelistas and have a travel bug. So that's an unearned advantage. Who gave you the right to be able to have that type of geographic advantage? It's an advantage, whether we see it as that or not. I think that there are some people in the US who would covet that uh, physical positioning.
And Mecca, Medina is like 8 hours drive. Beautiful, beautiful thing to know that you are so close to so many sacred sites and various cultural experiences.
Yeah, especially Muslims. I think a lot of Muslims covet the proximity that people in the UAE and like in those areas are specifically to Saudi Arabia, Mecca, Medina, those places, those sites. So that is an unearned advantage. Like, who gave you that geographic advantage to be so close to the city of the Prophet, God bless his soul and grant him peace, to the birthplace of Islam, quote unquote, things that make you go, hmm.
That's something a lot of people go for. I personally not a travel. I don't have a travel bug or anything like that, but it's nice for some people. And also just be nice to that next to the haram is cool. Hygiene is top tier there. Although my biggest culture shock was finding out why the plumbing systems don't support tissue there. Just let that sink in for a second. The plumbing systems there do not support tissue. So you're like, what do people use? Well, the bidet, their hands. Yeah, culture shock. I'm telling you, I wasn't expecting that. And I know people are very opinionated about this. I have close family members who were like, yeah, what do you mean? Like, for me, it was a culture shock. Okay, big one. Biggest one, I would say. But they have wipes with the food. All the food you get, you'll get served wipes. Even at fast food restaurants, like little neat wipes served with it. Top tier. I love it. There's also prayer rooms and mosques, like I mentioned earlier, and I instantly missed hearing the Adhan all the time when we return. Healthcare is still debatable, but I've heard about hotel style healthcare, which is awesome. And I want to take a moment to also talk about Saudi Airlines here. It's by far one of the best I've experienced. We started with a 2-passenger seat and moved to a 3-seater from good to better with a toddler. Space is everything. They immediately had the most pressing need of any that I had on the plane met, which was water. They served that, and they had perfect memorabilia for the toddler with his favorite, served with a smile. There was beautiful and pretty sauce, and movies were immediately ready. We had home in abundance. They had a backpack of mornings of the seconds when we came back to the States. So Hubs is still under contract for work overseas, but that's something that really made a difference to our pocket. So I really appreciated that and felt the Ramadan spirit with certain aspects that I just mentioned. And again, the picture's worth 1,000 words. I posted a few on the Substack, but it's really a lot more I could share. So again, comment, like, let me know, or 14. Let's get into it. Okay, so the cons are the scarcity of good open Wi-Fi and connection. And I think overall the vibe of scarcity is also present there. Even something as simple as social services, not simple. You realize how privileged we are as Americans when you see that it's not necessarily available to you when you go overseas, or when I went overseas. There are social services, but it's only for residents and whatnot. So it's tricky, it's challenging, and it's different. There's a lot of things like water, restrooms that are charged. They have charges on them.
Oh, okay. So here's where I talk about the cons. I start talking about the cons more in detail, and the unearned advantages that became apparent, right? The invisible unearned advantages of being a citizen of the US or Western country and that whole privilege, quote unquote. So one is the what I just mentioned, like how they charge for even like bathrooms sometimes. Wi-Fi is not as available, which makes a big difference. Like here in the US, you can find Wi-Fi a lot of places pretty simply. And so I think it does give more of a tourist vibe when that happens. Like you feel more like a tourist versus like being here in the US, I felt like I was at home. And I do imagine it might be different. It might not feel like as much of a issue if you were a citizen there.
But if you walk a little further, even the beach, we paid to go on the beach, and then we walked a little further after the fact and realized, like, oh, we could.
Even the beach, right? But there again, like you walk in and you see like a beach that is a part of the beach that is open and free. But it's almost like very transactional, where it's like almost like New York. I would imagine, like not even, but in some ways, how New York is very like hustle, hustle, and like you got to earn your keep and transactional. That it wasn't as fast paced naturally, but that was kind of the vibe it was giving. It's like New York. It's like all about the money.
There's no ramps really. Like you're hard pressed to find ramps in Abu Dhabi at least, and that's tricky, but not like the U.S. because the U.S. is the racism, right? Spirituality, for instance, like okay, yeah.
Oh yeah, somebody yelled the N word to me out of a car at one point, I believe. So that was something that I noticed. Like there is still racism. So even like no matter whether I'm in the US or the UAE, I don't think that I can avoid like anti-blackness per se, but there is that nationality privilege that really kind of balances it abroad.
That just goes into spirituality where you feel like I felt like it was wanting because anywhere there's racism, how can you really be not spiritual? You know what I mean? And it was uncomfortable with the nationality privilege because, for instance, a Circle K with a sit-down restaurant in it, it's like saying our trash is their treasure. Like everybody knows Circle K here isn't anything, but like I don't know. I understand. Like it's probably like I'm probably reading into it too much, and there's a lot more you could say about that. But definitely, there's white privilege, there's American privilege, and all of that. And I saw it with passports. I saw it with a lot of stuff. And there's different chargers there, so it might take more time to charge your phones. It's costly. It can be inconvenient with this cars and all that for sure. Sure. I may be nitpicking. Maybe I'm being a spoiled American, definitely. But I think that it really depends on you and your experience. You want to check it out, but as far as moving and living there permanently, like I liked it to visit, but I think a lot of people, a lot of Americans would agree with me that they wouldn't want to stay there. And I said that from before I went out there. So it's a preference. But yeah, simple things like we have a whole different Sephora there, which was like, oh my gosh, it's my birthday. I want my birthday surprise. I had to get like a whole new membership. Plumbing and it's like home. And restrictions on every time, but I'm just saying, like PDA is not allowed. People either believe in PDA, but public displays of affection, Also, the citizen.
So I will say that with a caveat, like I will put a caveat there for the PDA part. Like I know my sister-in-law at the time was saying that as long as you're not like effing, then they're not gonna actually crack down on you for PDA per se. But it's still kind of like weird that that's even. It's not weird, but it's like I see the advantage, quote unquote, compared to the US that would not even be a thought in some ways. But then again, too, it's not an advantage because according to our prophetic tradition, that it is more wise to be reserved in those regards because the same logic that they had, like this is the logic, is that you want to keep these things. It's like be careful of your blessings because everybody blessed is always envied, and like you have this blessing of a relationship, you just want to be a little low key with that. So I get that, and like we do still have indecent exposure laws here too, but again, like that's just like a little bit of the culture shock and starting to relate to quote unquote um oppression, like understanding that there are layers and it's not just this white versus black simplicity that I think honestly a lot of a lot of prejudiced people would have us believe. How disempowering is that to only look at it in black and white? And how much more empowering is it to look at it in terms of levels? We all have levels of oppression and being oppressed versus just being in this corner of, okay, this is like socially is all there is, like the 3D is all there is. There's a broader way to look at it, and there are levels. And we're coming to the end here of the cons that I saw living abroad, and how I was able to witness some of the unearned advantages of growing up in the U.S.
That's the biggest thing. I think if you were a citizen, you would have a different experience of it. But all in all, I'm so grateful to be back in the States.
Yeah, so then that's the big takeaways, like citizenship. Whether you're in the US, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in Central America or the Middle East, citizenship is a big part of the privilege. And like, regardless of where you are, if you're a citizen, if you're in the in group there, then you're already going to have certain bonuses that people in the out group wouldn't necessarily have. However, I do think that some countries have more advantages for citizens versus non citizens. And the UAE kind of was one of them. The US is definitely one of them. I think the UAE is trying to copy the US in that, actually. And that the US, um, even within that system of privilege, still has many disadvantages for citizens of that. And it's not as simple as even just having a passport. That you could have all the things like I do and still be gaslit and still be treated as if you were not one of the advantaged people, right? And who am I to get upset at that? Because at the end of the day, I didn't really earn it per se. Um, you could argue that my ancestors earned it and so on and so forth. But I think even that, it's like they didn't ask to be brought over from Africa. They did not ask to be colonized in the Americas. And I think that certainly we today, we're not actively asking for a lot of the privileges, quote unquote, blessings that we have. Because Allah could take anything, He can give anything at any time. We know this. But we tend to just like brush that over like, oh, it's just, you know, fluffy talk. But it's so true. Like nobody is promised tomorrow. And that is an advantage. Like to have another day to try to get things aligned, to have the ability to even reason and think and feel that, and to connect with the truth of that. And so, even under the thumb of oppression, which I would say the majority of us are, like there was a big movement here in the U.S. for a while about the 1%. We are the 99%. That's what we are. 99% majority of people in the U.S., majority of people in the world are oppressed on one level or another. And that if you're looking at it in the holistic level, even that 1% that are on top, quote unquote, elite class and all the things, they are oppressing themselves. They're oppressing their own souls by doing what they're doing. And it is more evident today than ever. And so I would just urge us to be more nuanced in the way that we're looking at earned and unearned advantages. It is a conversation to be continued. This is not meant to be like an academic discussion. This is not meant to be a, professional discussion. This is meant to be a conversation, as in between family, and just really opening up the dialogue on things, the way we look at things, right? And the unfair advantages that we all can share potentially, and how we all can be both oppressors and oppressed. And the reason why we would want that, like, it's disempowering to just look at ourselves as either oppressed or oppressor. And there's more to life than that. But I acknowledge and we accept that this is a reality for people on a certain level, that there are dominant social groups that have unfairly been given privileges to the disadvantage of the majority. So we're going to wrap up here. They are still in 1447. Just Googled it now. Yeah, and what about it? That is the Hijri calendar. Okay. So everything isn't about the sun. There's other ways, like the moon, to see and calculate things. And that's why we're the inventors of astronomy or astrology. Yeah, astronomy. It's astronomy, which is one of the most important sciences of our day. hmm So men color cover as well. Haya applies to men and women. 100%. Thank you, Brother Ahmed. I'm teaching my son that today. He prefers long pants to shorts. Your hijab is really pretty. Well, I'm not really teaching him. He's just like that. Your hijab is really pretty. The color suits you really well. Happy International Workers' Day. Is it Workers' Day? International Workers' Day? I know it's Teacher Appreciation Week next week, which I'm really excited for because I think that's going to be the first day that I get back in the classroom after taking a little break for work from home. I do Pearson all the time. So for those of you who ask or are thinking about it, oh my goodness, y'all probably can't even hear me. We're gonna sign off. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Um, I really appreciate your kindness, and I hope to see you again tomorrow. We have been discussing the. Let me just go and look really quick to make sure it's correct, because there's two different topics that are lined up. And the next one is regarding the prophet's intercession. Yes, that's what I thought. So now bless his soul and grant him peace. And the whole point is that you matter. So if the prophet Sallallahu could stay up late until his feet swole, praying for you, praying for me and us in the later times, to say the least, right? That he definitely is interceding for us to this day in spirit. You think about all the Muslims, every time they send blessings on the Prophet, God bless his soul and grant him peace, that they're praying for a man who prayed for us. You matter. Okay, we'll talk more about it, but I just can't emphasize enough how constantly, and not just from the prophet, but that's one specific example. Muslims around the world, believers around the world, humans around the world are really and truly grieving for the oppressed, grieving for those who are told constantly that they do not matter, specifically. Okay? We pray for people in general, but our hearts go out to those who are pushed down, those who are marginalized, those who are continuing to persist despite and beyond all of the oppression that leads to depression, the injustices. You matter. Until next time, please take care of yourselves. Please take care of your family. Wassalam.